Apartment 2B at the end of the ground floor hallway never had its lights on. The door was always shut, the curtains always drawn, and longtime neighbors gradually learned to slow their steps when walking past. Not out of fear, but out of respect for something that couldn't quite be named. Inside that apartment lived a man named Victor Maddox, 78 years old. Silver hair neatly trimmed, always wearing a buttoned-up shirt and a pair of military boots so meticulously polished that their original color could no longer be seen. He was once a top-tier commando, a Medal of Honor recipient, a man who had held grenades with bare hands, who had crawled through desert sands in the dead of night to rescue a wounded comrade under sniper fire. Now, he lived alone. No, not entirely. Beside him was a silent shadow, always walking half a step ahead, turning back every time it sensed a change in his breathing. A dog named Rex. No one knew how old Rex was. Some said 15. Others believed he might be even older than Victor. His back arched slightly, his gait like he had once carried an entire battlefield on his spine. Ears drooping, eyes clouded, but his gaze still burned bright whenever Victor laid a hand on his neck. Every morning at 6:45, the sound of a cane tapping 3 times echoed through the stone-tiled hallway. Victor moved step by step, left hand resting on Rex's back, right hand gripping a white cane tightly. No one walked with them, but they never lost their way. A blind man, an old dog, a pair of survivors who had endured 3 wars, 2 surgeries, and 1 abandonment, and they kept going, though no one asked them to. Have you ever seen him smile? A young college student who had just moved in asked the landlady. She chuckled softly and shook her head. No, but I've seen him sit for hours by the window, his hand on that dog's back, as if he needed nothing else. In a world where people make noise to be noticed, Victor and Rex walked unseen, yet left silence in their wake, the kind that made everyone stop and look, not out of pity, but because there was something intact in the way they existed without a sound. And no one knew that behind that silence was a story that, once told, would make an entire city pause, just to listen. Victor hadn't seen anything for years. A shard of shrapnel, no larger than a chopstick tip, had lodged itself into his optic nerve during a hostage rescue in Kandahar, taking his sight, but not his resolve. He didn't live like a helpless man. He lived like a soldier still on the battlefield. Only now, that battlefield was a small kitchen. A long hallway scented with damp wood, the uneven pavement outside the corner coffee shop. And there, Rex was his guide. No collar labeled guide dog. No specialized harness. Rex only needed to see Victor stand, and he would begin to move. He didn't bark, didn't need commands, never pulled too quickly, and never let Victor miss a step. Sometimes, Rex would stop abruptly. Victor never asked why. He just stood still. Maybe a child was running past. Maybe a street vendor had set up temporarily on the sidewalk. Or maybe, the wind had picked up and carried the scent of burning from a nearby construction site. Rex sensed what Victor could not see, smell, or hear, and Victor trusted him as if they were in enemy territory. The Luna's cafe on the corner was a familiar morning stop. Victor never placed an order. The owner, a brown-skinned woman named Margot, would see Rex walk in and immediately prepare a black coffee. No sugar, and a piece of dry toast. "Good morning, soldier," she'd say as she set the cup on the table. Victor didn't reply. He simply nodded. Rex would sit beside him, facing the door, like an ancient sentry. No yawning, no looking away, never abandoning his post, even when a delivery truck roared past the front window. Once, a curious young man asked Margot, "What can an old dog like that still do?" She replied simply, "He's guarding a world you've never stepped into." On the way home, Victor walked through the park. Children ran and played. Seniors exercised. A few people walked their dogs. No one paid attention to a blind man and his aging dog. Yet no one dared to enter the quiet space around them either. It was as if an invisible circle surrounded them, a silent border that only those who truly saw dared to cross. Victor stopped at his usual bench. Rex lay down, resting his head on Victor's worn military boots. In those boots were steps that had crossed battlefields. And beside them, eyes still alive, never having left their master's side. That life held no grand climax. No applause. No photographs. but in every unnoticed step. Victor and Rex were composing a symphony. One only hearts that had once been shattered could clearly hear. And somewhere in that dusty city, they kept walking, each day, in darkness, with the light held gently in each other's presence. That night in Kandahar, there was no moon. The sand was cold as ice, but the blood was hot as fire. Back then, Victor still had his eyes. As a lieutenant leading the Special Ops Team, Echo 6, he guided 6 men into the Red Zone, a territory marked as non-recoverable. The mission: rescue a kidnapped journalist. The terrain was complex. Landmines were buried everywhere. Air support was denied. When they reached the target house, the nightmare began. An improvised explosive device lay beneath a rug. The blast wasn't loud, but it was enough to throw everything into chaos. One soldier died instantly. Another broke his leg. Victor was hurled into a corner. Shrapnel lodged in his shoulder and pierced the back of his skull. He was bleeding out. He couldn't hear anyone calling. Couldn't locate his own voice. Then he heard a sound. Not human. A deep, strained whine, agonized, but determined. From the rubble, a military dog, still chained, was crawling toward him. All 4 legs were bloodied. One ear torn. The collar bearing a nearly scorched K9 insignia. But in the dog's eyes, the only thing still intact was duty. No one had given the order. Its heart had. Save this man, at all costs. Victor didn't know how, but that night, he was pulled from the wreckage. The first person to find him lying in the desert, still breathing, still gripping his rifle, was a rescue chopper soldier. Beside him, collapsed, was that dog. No name, no unit, no one knew where it came from. Only a faded string of characters on its collar. RX-09. Victor, barely conscious and bleeding, lifted his head slightly and whispered, "Call him Rex. If he lives, he comes home with me. If he dies, bury him next to me." 3 days later, in a military hospital, Victor woke up. His right arm was bandaged. His vision was blurry, but intact. A nurse entered the room, then froze. Rex was lying under Victor's bed, his head resting on the old soldier's leg. Fast asleep, his wounds already stitched. "How did he get here?" Victor asked, his voice almost breaking. The nurse replied, "He tore through his restraints, ran from the surgical ward, and found you by following the scent of your blood. We didn't dare stop him. Because, when we tried to pull him away, he didn't growl, didn't bark. He just looked at us with eyes that said, 'I've already chosen. This is my person.'" From that day forward, Rex never left Victor's side. No longer military equipment, not a pet. They were survivors, battle brothers. That scorched collar, Victor kept it to this day. The paracord frayed, the clasp worn, but on the inside, he had engraved by hand, "We don't need to see each other, we just need to never leave each other." Now, whenever Victor touches Rex's neck in the quiet heart of the city, he isn't just reaching for a guide rope. He's touching the moment between life and death, when a silent being chose not to let go of a human hand, and brought him back from where no one thought there was a way out. And that is why, even though he is blind, Victor has never felt lost. Because light doesn't only reside in the eyes. It lives in the unshakable loyalty of a dog who once walked out of hell, just to keep a promise to one man. 4 days a week, at exactly 10 a.m., Victor and Rex appeared at the Jefferson County Public Library. No one had asked them to. There was no contract. They just showed up. A young librarian once said the first time he saw Victor leading Rex into the children's reading area, he thought they'd entered the wrong room. But Rex didn't hesitate. He walked straight to the world map rug, lay down beside the age 6 bookshelf. Victor sat down on a low wooden chair and opened a picture book, though he couldn't see a single word. He read from memory, from feeling, from the familiar breath of pages he had known by heart through long years of darkness. His voice was deep, steady, and warm, like the crackle of a campfire in winter. The children, of all skin colors, some hyperactive, some curled up wearing hearing aids, gradually inched closer. They didn't know why, but when Victor read, they sat stiller. When Rex closed his eyes and rested his head on the leg of the nearest child, the whole room fell silent, like a cathedral. The first time Lily came, she said nothing. 9 years old, uneven braids, always clutching a stuffed cat. Her teacher had brought her to the library as part of a speech therapy program. But no one expected anything special. Lily hadn't spoken in nearly a year. Not because she couldn't, but because she no longer believed anyone was worth speaking to. Then one morning, as Victor read a story about a little hedgehog lost in a dark forest, Rex left his spot, walked over to Lily, and lay down, head resting gently on her trembling legs. Lily didn't cry, didn't smile. She simply lowered the stuffed cat and placed her hand on Rex's head. No one dared breathe too loud. Victor paused in his reading, as if he could sense something in the air had just changed. Rex stayed still, and Lily lowered her head, leaned in close to the old dog's ear, and whispered a tiny sentence, so quiet that only Rex could hear it. "You got lost once too, didn't you?" From that day on, Lily never missed a reading session. She started by reading silently, then out loud. Then she began bringing books to Victor, books with dogs, with warriors, with characters who weren't perfect, but who survived. A month later, at a special parent conference, Lily's mother stood up, tears she couldn't hide falling freely. "I don't know what he did. But thanks to Mr. Victor, and thanks to Rex, my daughter believes again, in stories, and in her own voice." No one at the library had ever imagined that a nearly 16-year-old dog and a blind 78-year-old man could help restore a child's ability to speak. But they did, not with technology, not with therapy, but with quiet presence and love that required no words. Some people are born to speak beautifully, but some souls are born simply to listen so deeply that others find their voice again. Victor didn't need to see Lily. Rex didn't need to understand every story. But each time they sat beside that little girl, the world became just a little easier to breathe in. And that was magic, even if no one ever called it that. Victor's kitchen was small, with cream-colored tiles cracked in several places. Pots and pans hung on hooks, in the exact same positions for the past 10 years, because Victor couldn't see. Every movement, every step in this space relied on perfect memory. 4 steps to the sink, 2 diagonal steps past the gas stove, a 180-degree turn to open the drawer for a spoon. Everything was so precise that Rex didn't even need to follow when Victor made tea. He just sat by the doorway, standing guard like a soldier protecting a base. But that day, something was off. Victor was boiling water, listening to the morning news on the radio, when a drop of hot water spilled from the old, rusted kettle onto the floor. A tiny thing, invisible, but to a blind man, it was a trap lying in wait. Just one step, a brief slip, a grasping hand. The kettle toppled, steam hissed violently. The fall wasn't severe, but Victor's shoulders slammed into the kitchen cabinet, and he lay still. No one heard him groan. No one saw him curled on the floor, gasping, blind eyes turned toward the ceiling like searching for a light, one that had long gone out. But Rex knew. Within 2 seconds, he ran over. He didn't howl like a pet dog. He didn't scratch the door like in the movies. He knocked, 3 times, on the front door. Just like Victor tapped his cane each morning before stepping outside. 3 knocks. Short, firm. The apartment next door belonged to Mrs. Elsie, 84 years old. Widowed, who used to complain that Rex walked too close to her doormat. She wasn't one to open her heart easily. Didn't like noise. Didn't like being asked for help. But that day, something about those 3 unfamiliar knocks made her come out. She saw Rex gently bumping his head against her door, not aggressively, but firmly. She opened it. Rex immediately bolted back toward Victor's apartment, then turned to look at her. Again, ran off, came back, locked eyes with her. No one had trained a dog to do this. But some kinds of loyalty don't need training. Elsie stepped over, opened the door to Unit 2B. Steam was gently rising from the kettle. Victor lay motionless on the tiled floor. "Oh dear God," she breathed. Then immediately called emergency services. Grabbed a dry towel to wipe the hot water, and knelt beside him like a mother tending to a child who'd fallen off a bike. Rex sat beside them, didn't bark, didn't look away. He rested his chin on Victor's shoulder, touching him as if transferring a heartbeat. When the ambulance arrived, a young paramedic asked, "Who called it in?" Elsie replied, still shaken, "It wasn't me, it was the dog who called me." They looked at each other. One person chuckled, half doubting, but Rex stayed exactly where he was. as if to say, you don't need to believe. You just need to survive. That evening, Victor woke up in the hospital, his shoulder bandaged, and gently asked, "Is Rex okay?" The doctor smiled. "Better than all of us. And thanks to him, so are you." Victor nodded slightly, not surprised, not overwhelmed, just like a soldier who had survived one more day, thanks to a comrade. As for Mrs. Elsie, from that day on, every morning, she hung a small bag of biscuits outside Victor's door. For Rex, she didn't explain. Victor didn't ask. And Rex just nodded silently whenever he saw her pass by. No need for thanks. No need for forgiveness. Just the quiet understanding that, sometimes, a dog who knows when to knock can change the way an old person sees the world. Because in a noisy city, some falls happen in silence. But thankfully, there are still quiet souls who know how to awaken hearts that have long closed. One quiet weekend morning, the sky was as clear as if the entire city had just been washed clean by the rain the night before. Victor and Rex left apartment 2B as usual. Victor's white cane tapping 3 times against the tile floor. Rex's footsteps steady beside him. Their destination today wasn't the library, but Memorial Park, a place with long benches shaded by trees and a still lake that mirrored the sky. Victor liked sitting there, not to see, but to listen to the world breathe. The sound of wings gliding overhead, children laughing, bicycles rolling over gravel paths, and the breeze teasing the tiny paper boats someone had set adrift across the water. Rex lay curled beneath him, head resting on Victor's worn boots, eyes half closed but ears always turning toward the slightest sound. That's when it happened. The screech of brakes, a scream tearing the air, then the howl of an engine ripping the ground apart. A black SUV had lost control, crashing through the wooden fence by the roadside and speeding straight toward the playground. No one reacted in time. A little boy, about 6, stood frozen in the middle of the field, clutching a soccer ball, his wide eyes paralyzed as if even time had refused to move forward. And Rex sprang up. No command, no hesitation, no thought for what was behind him. He launched forward, as if the order had been etched into his muscles 15 years ago. Victor couldn't even get up in time. He only felt the leash slip from his hand. Then the heavy, blunt thud, the sound of a child bursting into tears. And then, a terrifying silence. The first person to run over was a student live streaming the lake. By sheer chance, his camera caught the exact moment Rex's body slammed the child out of the SUV's path, taking the hit himself. When the video was uploaded just 30 minutes later, titled, "Old Dog Saves Boy from Runaway Car," no one saw it coming. The entire internet exploded. It was shared millions of times. Comments poured in like floodwater. A silent hero. The world doesn't deserve creatures like this. So many humans wouldn't do what Rex did in 1 second. Meanwhile, at the park, the boy was taken to safety, with only a scraped arm. Rex lay motionless. Victor was guided to him. He knelt beside the old dog, trembling hands feeling for the familiar shape of his head, lips moving. "Rex, it's me, I'm here." Rex didn't bark, didn't whine, just exhaled gently, his nose brushing Victor's fingers, before closing his eyes as if to say, "I'm still here, but this time, I'm a little tired." Rex was rushed to a nearby veterinary clinic, where doctors confirmed rib injuries, fractures. But what stunned them was, despite the pain, he didn't bite, didn't panic. He only kept staring at the door, waiting for Victor to walk in. At the same time, online, the hashtag Rex the Brave shot to #1 on Twitter, accompanied by the 12-second video that shook hearts around the world. TV stations, reporters, and K9 organizations all reached out. "We want to know about this dog and the blind man who walks beside him." But Victor didn't watch television. He just sat in the clinic's waiting room, still holding the leash, the frayed end tangled like strands of silver hair, quietly waiting for the doctor to come out with a nod. Or not. There are moments that need no audience. But when accidentally captured, they become symbols. That day, the whole world knew about Rex. But only Victor understood. This wasn't the first time Rex had saved someone. And maybe, it wouldn't be the last. 2 weeks after the park incident, the city began to look at Victor and Rex differently. A coffee shop hung a hand-drawn portrait. Rex, the silent hero. Children sketched pictures of the flying dog. An animal welfare organization wanted to award a Medal of Honor. And Victor? He remained as silent as ever. Still woke up on time. Tapping his cane 3 times. Still walked down the long hallway. Out into the street with Rex, now bandaged around the ribs. Moving a little slower. But life doesn't warn you before the second blow. That afternoon, the sun was harsh. Victor decided to walk to the organic food store at the corner to buy some dried mint leaves. Rex's favorite remedy when he had stomach aches. They crossed the Jefferson Avenue intersection, a busy junction with faulty traffic lights. But Victor knew every crack in the sidewalk like the back of his hand. Rex, though not fully healed, still walked with his head held high, as if to prove he hadn't given up. What they didn't know was that there were 2 new faces on the patrol team that day. Officers Miller and Davis, young rookies, barely 2 months in the force. Fresh out of personal defense training, where one lesson stood out. If a dog charges at you, assess the threat immediately. Victor had just stepped off the curb when he heard the short wail of a siren. A police car screeched to a halt. Miller jumped out, taser already in hand. Rex, sensing danger, immediately turned and lunged to shield Victor from the car. Davis, from the passenger seat, shouted, "Loose dog, threat." No one asked. No one waited. In 3 seconds of chaos, Miller pulled the trigger. The taser fired. 2 electric prongs embedded into Rex's body. At the same time, Victor panicked and flinched. His cane dropped. His step faltered. He fell. His head struck the curb. Unconscious. Rex writhed under the current but didn't yelp. Didn't howl. He only crawled toward Victor, dragging his shaking body. Eyes locked on the familiar silhouette that had just collapsed like an entire world caving in. People nearby began screaming. A woman pulled out her phone to record. An Uber driver stopped and rushed forward, blocking Davis. "You just tased an old dog that saved a child. Do you even know who that man is?" Miller stammered. "We thought it was attacking. No caller, no warning." An elderly woman from the grocery store stepped out and pointed directly. "That's Victor Maddox, retired Navy SEAL, blind. And that's Rex, the dog who just saved a child from an accident. You just shot a hero." No one said another word. No one dared back away. Only the camera lens kept rolling. And blood slowly pooled on the searing concrete. Victor and Rex were rushed to the Central Hospital by ambulance, while Davis and Miller were immediately suspended. Victor's records, his medals, military service history, and the park rescue video flooded the media within 24 hours. Outrage erupted like a fire that had never gone out, just waiting for its final spark. And this time, Rex was that spark. Not everyone realizes. A nation can endure war, disasters, poverty, but it will erupt in fury when it witnesses a loyal being struck down. Just because its courage was misunderstood. 3 a.m. At a former military base in Virginia, a man in uniform was wide awake. General Alfred Vance, former commander of the Elite Special Forces Unit, was rewatching the video of the heroic K-9 being tasered in the street. Without a word, he placed his hand on the table, opened the internal military comms, and gave a simple order. "I want the full file on Victor Maddox, now. And tell me where Rex is." Just 6 hours later, a convoy of military vehicles appeared outside the Central Hospital of New Orleans. No sirens, no press, just uniformed soldiers, standing in formation outside the ICU where Victor Maddox lay unconscious. One officer entered, handing over a letter stamped in red. "I, on behalf of the United States Federal Military, formally request protection of war witness Victor Maddox. And request immediate medical supervision for Senior Service K-9, Rex." The doctors were stunned. The patient's relatives were in shock. But everything fell silent when Rex was wheeled into a private care unit. Equipped with climate control, a military fleece blanket, and a nameplate at the door. Rex. ID. RX-09. Survival comrade. Rank. Irreplaceable. The media exploded. Headlines flooded in. From battlefield to boulevard. K-9 shot for loyalty. The blind old man and his four-legged friend wake a nation. Military steps in. Justice for Victor and Rex. On social media, the hashtag #Justice for Rex became a symbol. Veterans, Animal welfare groups and families of fallen soldiers all shared Victor's story. A resurfaced interview showed Victor once saying, "I'm not afraid of the dark. I only fear no one will remember the names of those who led me out of it." That single line made the entire nation pause. General Vance held a press conference, standing among medals and fellow veterans, and declared, "We cannot stand by while one of our own, whether two-legged or four, is harmed on the very soil they once bled to protect." The New Orleans police chief publicly bowed in apology. The police department suspended the two young officers and launched an internal investigation. The city government announced plans to build a bronze statue of Rex and Victor in front of the library where they once read to children. But at the hospital, amid all the photos, articles, and nationwide outrage, Victor remained unconscious, and Rex still lay motionless, eyes closed, breath shallow. Only little Lily, now brave enough to hold a microphone, sat in the hospital hallway reading stories aloud in front of TV cameras. Mr. Victor once said that Rex didn't need to understand every word in a story. Just listen with his heart. Today, I'm reading so Rex knows the whole world is listening to him now. Some battles only truly begin after the guns fall silent. And some heroes never have to leave the trenches to make an entire society stop and look inward. Friday night, light rain. The Central Hospital, as always, lay under dim lights and the steady hum of ventilators. In ICU room 413, Victor Maddox had been motionless for nearly 8 days. His face pale, a bruise still lingering on his forehead. Rex, still bandaged around the ribs, curled up at the foot of the hospital bed. His head resting on the old combat boots Victor had worn across both war zones and city streets. He didn't eat much, didn't sleep deeply. With every set of footsteps echoing down the hallway, Rex would lift his head. Not to bark, just to hope. Near midnight, the head nurse noticed something strange. Victor's right hand, long lifeless, twitched slightly. Rex sprang up instantly, pressing his head against the side of the bed. A soft breath. Then, Victor's lips moved. "Rex." The old dog let out a low, trembling whimper, choked from a throat that had held silence for too long. The room held its breath. Victor opened his eyes. He couldn't see, but he didn't need to. His hand reached down, and found the only thing he truly needed. Warm fur and the steady heartbeat of his oldest friend. "You're still here?" Rex lowered his head completely into Victor's hand, as if he'd been waiting all this time for that signal to return to duty. News spread fast. Media swarmed the hospital. They couldn't get in, but they waited. Like waiting for an old general to emerge from a bunker after years of silence. General Vance came in person. He stood at Victor's bedside, bowed his head, and took his hand. "We've let you fight too long without backup. Now it's our turn to stand watch." Victor gave a faint smile, his voice hoarse. "I was never alone. I had Rex." The next morning, the chief physician held a press conference. Before the cameras, he declared, "Victor is now out of critical condition. And what's truly remarkable, his vitals stabilized the moment he touched Rex. This isn't just medicine. It's a bond that goes beyond science." People brought flowers to the hospital gates. Children drew pictures for Rex, the dog with angel wings. A veteran quietly placed an old dog tag by the window, engraved with, "I survived because of my comrade." They don't need to speak, just be there. Lily came to visit. She climbed up on a chair, placed a picture book on Victor's chest, and whispered, "Today it's my turn to read. You can close your eyes, just like I used to." Victor nodded. Rex breathed calmly. And for the first time since the accident, the room was filled with gentle laughter. There are heroes who survive war, but only truly come alive again when they hear the familiar voice of another soul. Whether spoken in words, worn claws, or the quiet weight of a head resting beside them in the long night. Victor had awakened, Rex had risen, and the world was ready to listen once more. 1 week after Victor regained consciousness, the Central Hospital became a destination for people who had never stepped foot in a medical facility before, from senators, Navy captains, to little boys clutching hand-drawn flags, trembling in the rain just to catch a glimpse of the blind man with the dog who saves people. Victor was moved to a private room on the top floor, not because of fame, but because he refused to go down to the lobby when the media requested interviews. I'm not a hero, he said. I'm just still alive. And Rex, he's the reason I haven't been buried twice. On Sunday morning, a handwritten letter arrived, sealed with the insignia of the Pentagon. Inside was an honorary invitation. On behalf of the United States military, we respectfully invite Mr. Victor Maddox and his comrade Rex to speak at the first ever National K-9 Warrior Honor Ceremony, held in Washington, D.C. The last line, written in blue ink, read, "No one understands silent sacrifice better than you. General Alfred Vance." Victor read it with his fingers, slowly, then turned to Rex, who was gently chewing a soft leather star gifted by a little girl, and said, "Got another mission, partner. This time, no guns. Just show up." Rex perked his ears. He didn't need to read the words. He only needed to understand the voice. The journey to Washington began in a special military vehicle. Victor and Rex sat in the backseat, window half down, a soft breeze flowing over Victor's silver hair and Rex's drooping ears. No one talked much in the vehicle, but every glance from their escorts, young veterans, carried silent reverence. One of them whispered into the radio, "This car used to carry generals. Today, it carries 2 survivors, who never surrendered." In Washington, D.C., at Liberty Plaza, a grand stage had been built. A hastily cast bronze sculpture stood tall. A soldier kneeling, his hand resting on a dog's head, both with their eyes gently closed. At the steps, Victor ascended slowly, cane in hand, Rex walking faithfully at his right side as always. The crowd was silent, no cheers, just thousands of people rising to their feet, removing their hats, placing hands over hearts. Victor stopped at the microphone, adjusted his earpiece to catch the echo. He spoke slowly, each word like tapping a chisel into the memory of a generation. "I've seen great men fall for a country that never knew their names. But I've never seen a 4-legged friend leave me behind, even when I was no one." He turned toward Rex. He didn't need a victory. He just needed to be there when I was at my weakest. And sometimes, just being there is enough to change a man's fate. Rex sat at Victor's feet, eyes gently closed, as if nodding in agreement. The ceremony ended with something unprecedented. A solid silver K-9 Medal of Honor, awarded for the first time in history not through a proxy, but by Victor's own hands. As he fastened it around Rex's neck, the crowd rose and applauded. No slogans, just the sound humanity reserves for something real and eternal. There are victories not won on battlefields, but in the moments when you have nothing left, and someone still chooses to stay. Washington that day wasn't blanketed in flags, but in the shadow of 2 souls. One who could no longer see the light, and one who had become it. 2 weeks after the ceremony in Washington, D.C., Victor and Rex returned to New Orleans, in silence. No journalists waiting, no banners, no cameras, just a small handwritten note taped beside the old apartment elevator, where Mrs. Elsie, the once cold neighbor, had scribbled, "Welcome home, heroes." Victor smiled. He didn't need applause. He only needed Rex by his side, still walking with a slight tilt from the healing wound, but with eyes brighter than any medal hanging from his neck. The next morning, they returned to the library. The children rushed toward them, not out of curiosity, but because they missed them. They missed how Rex would yawn dramatically when bored with a story. They missed how Victor would pause whenever someone had been quiet too long, and gently ask, "Would you like to help me read the next part?" Lily, now the official host of the children's reading program, stepped onto the small stage. In her hands was a brand new book, its cover illustrated with a dog carrying a cane in his mouth, guiding a blind man beneath a starlit sky. Title: The Light Through His Ears. Authors: Lily and Victor. That day, during storytime, Rex didn't lie down like he usually did. He stood beside Victor, tall, tail gently wagging, as if he knew he was the main character in the story. When Lily read the scene of the old dog standing in front of an oncoming car, the room fell utterly still. And for the first time in public, Victor spoke, not reading from a book, but sharing from his soul. "Rex is not a rescue dog. He doesn't talk, he doesn't write, but he taught me what even war never could. That trust can survive, even when you can't see anything at all." 1 month later, the Rex and Victor Foundation was born. Not big, no flashy office, but each year, It sponsors 25 service dogs, specially trained to accompany veterans, autistic children, and the visually impaired. On every harness, a single line is engraved. You don't need to see me. Just walk with me. Rex was 16 that year, far beyond the average life expectancy of any working dog. But when the vet was asked about it, she simply shook her head and smiled. I can't explain it. He's not living on biology. He's living on a promise. Victor nodded, because he knew exactly what that promise was. There are creatures who never know they're heroes. They only know that when their friend needs to keep walking, they won't leave first. And there are stories that never need a movie adaptation, because they already exist as warmth, as footsteps, as scars, and as silent nods on a very long road that two souls once chose. Never to walk alone. That winter came earlier than usual. A chilly wind swept through the narrow streets of New Orleans, slipping past cracked, weathered wooden window frames. Victor pulled on his old military coat, white cane in hand, but this time, there were no quiet paw steps beside him. Rex, his comrade, his friend, his light, lay still on the wool blanket by the window. No pain, no struggle. It was simply time. That morning, Victor sat beside him, his thin, weathered hand running gently through the now gray fur. You knew, didn't you, Rex? I'm not afraid. You taught me how to walk through darkness. Now go on. I'll tell the rest of the story. Rex lifted his head one final time. He didn't howl, didn't whimper, just touched his nose softly to Victor's palm. A final fingerprint to seal a silent pact that had never needed words. Then he closed his eyes and left, peacefully, as if he'd never really gone. Rex's funeral was not grand. Just a wooden bench in the library courtyard, a wreath shaped like a dog bone, and a black and white photograph. Rex, companion, teacher, hero. Victor sat in the front row. Mrs. Elsie stood beside him, no tears, but eyes red and swollen. Lily stepped onto the small podium, her voice trembling. He didn't need to understand our language, but he made us all find our voice again. The very next day, at the city square, they unveiled a bronze statue. A dog sitting quietly beside a pair of military boots. At the base, a single inscription read, "Some heroes don't wear medals. They wear fur and immeasurable loyalty." Victor returned to apartment 2B. He lived slowly, read stories to children at the library, drank mint tea. Sometimes, he'd still pause, as if expecting a gentle nudge at his foot. There were no steady footsteps each morning, but something remained, a warmth, an invisible presence, a silent knowing. 10 years later, when Victor passed away, they found a notebook in the drawer beside his bed. On the final page, he had written just one line. If I was ever led out of the dark, it was because someone else dared to walk into it first. VM. This story does not end in death. It ends in continuation, because somewhere out there, a child will lose their voice again. An old man will sit alone. A weary soldier will falter. And then, another soul, untrained, unnamed, will quietly arrive, sit beside them, and stay. In silence. In love. In an unwavering presence no words could ever describe. Because some heroes never disappear. They simply live on, in the hearts of those they once saved. Not all heroes stand on podiums. Some simply stay. When the world turns away. No spotlight. No demands. Just a quiet head resting beside your feet on the darkest days. And a silent spark that reignites something you thought had long since burned out. Victor was once a soldier. But it was Rex, a dog who couldn't speak our language, who taught him how to live again. When the light outside goes out, loyalty, love, and the presence of a living soul beside you become the light within, a light no illness can extinguish. You may have fallen, lost faith, sat in the dark, not knowing why you were still here. And then, sometimes, someone didn't leave. A gentle touch, a pair of waiting eyes, a steady breath, because of you. And that alone is enough to help you rise again. If you've ever had a Rex in your life, a soul that said nothing, but stayed, hold on to them. And if you haven't, be that soul for someone else. We don't live forever, but being present at the right time can change someone's life forever. We bow to all our comrades, human or not, who chose to stay, even when all the lights had gone out. Because sometimes, the only thing you need to keep going is knowing that you are not alone.